The best way to start this video is with a timeline on the whole Metoo movement. The Metoo movement, if you do not know, is a social movement and awareness campaign against sexual abuse, sexual harassment, and rape culture. For the remainder of this video, I will lump all of those into harm or unconsensual interactions because this is YouTube and you know how to go. The phrase Me Too was initially used in this context on social media in 2006 on MySpace by sexual assault survivor and activist Tarana Burke. The purpose of Me Too, initially voiced by Burke as well as those who later adopted the tactic, is to empower people who were harmed, especially young, vulnerable women of color. On October 16th, 2017, following the exposure of numerous allegations against film producer Harvey Weinstein, Alyssa Milano, without crediting Tarana Burke, which I'll get into more later, encouraged using the phrase as a hashtag to help reveal the extent of the problem of harm and unconsensual interactions. By showing how many people have been affected, it encouraged women to speak up about these abuses and to know that they were not alone. This movement led many in Hollywood, major networks, many journalists, many politicians to lose their jobs, lose their positioning. On the record, 198 men and 3 women have lost their job due to the Me Too movement. We also witnessed a few long-time known offenders like R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, and Bill Cosby get convicted of these allegations, although Bill Cosby is right now free on a legal technicality. So these seem like steps in the right direction for many women who have been harmed in this way. Me Too was a phrase coined by a black woman, made for black women and other women of color, but has not been something highly effective for black women and women of color, in particular these women in the hip-hop industry. It seemed to shine a light on a lot of the harm in a lot of other industries, but the hip-hop industry, with the exception of R. Kelly, kind of, went untouched. So today we'll be analyzing the reasons the Me Too movement hasn't taken hold in the hip-hop industry. Let's roll that intro. Hello, my name is Queen. Welcome to the Mixed Vixen channel. If you are new here, hey boo, and if you are not new here, thanks for coming through again. I appreciate you. This video has been a long time coming. I've actually thought of creating this video while the Tory Lanez trial was going on, and when the verdict came that he was guilty of shooting Megan in the foot, I tweeted this tweet on my personal Twitter and it went viral. So many names came up of black women who have spoke out about being harmed by black men and hardly any repercussions happened, or the men were still able to continue their careers and be fine. We have Drew Dixon, we have Dee Barnes, we have Anita Hill, we have Desiree Washington, we have Ariana Jackson. There's so many names of black women in these public industries that have been open and revealed to us the perpetrators of their harm, and close to nothing has happened, and many of these men have lived on to have great careers and for many people to be considered legends and the greatest of all time. This video might be longer than most of my videos, so do whatever that you need to do to decompress, roll up, get a drink, get some snacks, and don't be afraid to hit that pause button if you need to and to come back later. This video will be very information packed, and I understand needing to pause for your own self-care. So let's begin with the cultural significance and overview of the hip-hop industry. There is no way that hip-hop is the biggest genre in the world, the largest, most popular music genre in the world. That's not by accident, and it's not for no reason.
Hip-hop is this. 1, 2, 3, 4, hit, and
Hip hop started in the Bronx, where I'm from Black American and Caribbean communities in the Bronx in the 1970s. I want to add that Puerto Rico isn't a Caribbean. I saw a conversation on TikTok saying that Puerto Ricans weren't a part of the birth of hip hop. They were. And it's weird to erase that. Like that's very harmful erasure. When hip hop began, there were four main elements. So there was MCing, that's what we call rap now, which has taken over the kind of the whole genre. Then there was DJing, which still exists. It exists outside of the realms of hip hop now. Breakdancing, which is more of a subculture at this point, is not as big as rapping or DJing. And graffiti, which is definitely a counterculture, still very underground, still something that is looked down upon. But all those pieces were the elements of hip hop. All of those pieces are from urban culture. So all of those things make up hip hop. Rap has just taken over as the main element and kind of the element that people acknowledge when it comes to hip hop. So early pioneers of hip hop were figures like DJ Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, African Bambaataa. Put a pin in that because we're going to revisit them later in the video. It revolutionized the way that we listen to music. So people are now using samples and just using pieces of the record to create music with. So you get your mom's old record and you only use like this amount of the record to create a whole track. And then you have the MC who is really just there to get the crowd engaged and into it. So they're, rhyming and stuff to get you into it and all of that. The part of the Bronx that hip hop started in is actually the part of the Bronx that I am from and I grew up in. Granted, decades later, because I was not alive in the 70s, but I just like to always say that. Cedar Park, where they talk about those parties that happened in Cedar Park. I lived right up the block from there. I used to swing on that tire swing. Those parties weren't happening when I was a kid, because like I said, decades later, but still, I was, amongst where they was at. Cedric Avenue, where DJ Kool Herc was from, across the street. That's where, I'm just saying the essence is there. It's in me, okay? The rise of hip hop is also interesting because hip hop was a genre that was deeply hated from a lot of musicians. You think people hated disco? They hated hip hop. And it wasn't just white people who hated hip hop. There were black people who hated hip hop just as much. My mom liked hip hop now, but when it first started, my mom told me she did not like it. My mother prefers hip hop, 90s hip hop. But whatever was happening in the 80s, 70s, my mother was like, get that out of here. A lot of black people also did not like hip hop when it first came about. And a lot of the reasons were due to respectability politics. And they didn't like people from these urban inner cities telling these stories in different ways, because we've always had music that told stories, but the picture that hip hop drew, the picture that hip hop painted was something completely different and something very raw in comparison to black music communicating the many intersections of being poor, black, uneducated, so on and so forth. And a lot of black people didn't want people knowing our business in that way. Also because the way the music was made, they didn't think it was musicianship. You're stealing, you're using pieces of other people's work to create music, and you're not using instruments. It was just so many things about hip hop that people did not like it as an exception. Graffiti is still something hated for the most part. They didn't like seeing the kids dancing on the street. I still see it hated. Showtime on the train, those boys dancing on the train is like a very, very similar disdain for break dancers back when hip hop first came on the scene. This year is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. It's very interesting now to see that it is the biggest genre in the world. The way that people treat hip hop is the way people were treating jazz back in the day. And it's interesting how much people are trying to gatekeep hip hop, and I think it is important because we see what happened to jazz. Hip hop also has many successes that mirror what the American dream is supposed to be. So these are like, kind of that bootstrap dream. Most artists present themselves in this way, that they come from nothing, they come from a hard life. Hip hop is a way for them to persevere and get out of the life of the street, of not being a drug dealer anymore, not having to rob and steal or do whatever crime that they have to do to survive. So for many people who are really into hip hop, they see hip hop weirdly as an American dream, showing that we can like create something from nothing and that something could lead to capital. Some rappers achieve mainstream recognition, and which guarantees financial prosperity, has helped create more Black music executives and created Black media entities, and catering to hip hop markets has created fashion labels and, you know, many things that hip hop has carved out for a section of Black people in the United States that had gone unheard for a very, very long time. So I understand kind of the romanticization of hip hop in that way. How many movie stars has hip hop made? How many rich people has hip hop made? I understand why people attach that American dream to it, although that American dream is false. So hip hop, it spreads beyond Cedar Park and Cedric Avenue in the Bronx, and it goes to other urban communities across the nation, and we're all kind of, you know, telling the same stories in various different ways, but we're telling the same stories. So it also creates this sense of community for Black people and then for other people as well, because hip hop is the biggest music genre in the world. Hip hop has been instrumental in empowering marginalized communities. It's given voice to social issues and political activism. It has spread awareness through rap lyrics, making us aware of police brutality, making us aware of systemic racism, making us aware of other hardships that we're marginalized for because of our identities. Although hip hop gave voice to a lot of the systemic issues that were happening in Black cities across America, it also highlighted some of the internalized issues that Black people have across America. So the prevalence of misogyny and objectification didn't become widely popular until the 90s. Since the 90s has consistently happened. Me being a woman, there are certain lyrics that I can just take it for what it is, and then there's some lyrics that are just too much for me, right? So having to decide which parts of hip hop you will engage in, which parts of hip hop you will not. And also there are women, Black women, who have decided to not engage with hip hop at all because of that. Also, the hypermasculinity that exists in hip hop, that is another byproduct that we could do without. The homophobia, the transphobia in hip hop, other things we can do without, but they exist so much within the culture that for many who are not of those identities, so women, queer people, they don't think there's anything wrong with it existing there. So it's been a huge force for the marginalized, but it's also been a huge force that has further marginalized women and femmes and queer people, and has also contributed bad things to the culture as well. No longer just telling the stories of the unheard of communities, but also profiting from these stories of people from these communities and degrading some of the people from these communities. Hip hop being a vehicle for community organizing and youth engagement is great, but while that is happening, it has also highlighted the misogyny, the homophobia, and the capitalistic ideals that, although did not start in the hip hop community, it does communicate to the masses how these harmful systems exist within our communities. Hip hop did not create misogyny, but that does not excuse hip hop from participating in misogyny, misogynoir, homophobia, or transphobia. It's important to highlight that these things do not exist in a vacuum. And this existing intracommunally is the result of these larger systems affecting us and kind of us just mirroring what we see, assuming that replicating these systems will provide liberation for us. This doesn't mean it's okay and we should just leave it be because this is how the system is. So of course hip hop is that way. Of course not. There are too many Black women, too many Black femmes, too many Black queer people who are affected by these systems and will continue to be. And just because these systems outside of us exist that way does not mean that we should perpetuate these systems intercommunally. We can, and I say this so much, we can create the world we want. even within hip hop. So I want to continue this video with a disclaimer. I believe every woman in this video's accusation. I'm going to say allegedly for legal reasons. And where there is a conviction, I'm going to say with conviction that this person did what they did. I want to get into some cases of Black women who have spoke up about being harmed before the Me Too movement and the popular discourse that came out of those situations. I don't even know if many people watching know this, but many years ago, Mike Tyson was convicted of former heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson, accused of harming 18-year-old beauty pageant contestant Desiree Washington, was found guilty by an Indiana jury. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. I believe he only did 6 years because 4 years of that was suspended. The popular conversation surrounding that case was a rally for Mike Tyson and that Desiree Washington was lying so that she can become famous. I vaguely remember that I was young. I vaguely remember she shouldn't have went to his hotel room late at night. What was she doing there? What would she expect? A lot of that conversations were happening. The blame of this being on Desiree.
The Washington Post conducted interviews with young women in college of your age, Black women, and they didn't seem to show a lot of sympathy for you. One said, 18-year-olds are not naive in this day and age. What did she think a guy wanted at 2 in the morning? Another said, she asked for it, she got it, it's not fair to cry rape.
It's sad. It's sad that women in 1992 feel that way. It really is.
Some supporters of Mike Tyson have said that this turned out to be a racist trial, that Mike Tyson was convicted because he's a Black man.
That also puzzles me, and that also hurts me because our people fought for years to get in the civil rights movement for equal rights, equal treatment, and to take the side of a Black man over a Black woman is not equal. That's not what I believe that we fought for years. I have worked so hard for everything that I am now, and to have all that taken away from me and to have people say that he has so much more to offer society is sick. You know, it disgusts me.
Since that case, it did kind of shift back in the early 90s. I believe this was in 1993. So what if it's late at night? Or so what if she's dressed that way? That's when that started to enter the discourse. And that's when certain phrases like started to become more popular in conversations like this one. But many people ridiculed Desiree. They looked into her sexual history. They really tried to make her seem like a groupie who wanted to use this to gain popularity, which is totally untrue because I'm sure for many of you, this is the first time you've heard of Desiree Washington's name. She only did, I think, 1 or 2 interviews, never got paid for those interviews, and then she's kind of has disappeared. When I went to Google her, the last I heard she was a teacher, but she may have changed her name. They even say that she may have gotten plastic surgery so that she could look different. But Mike Tyson has lived on to have a career, have more fights, be a champion, now has a podcast that everyone's enjoyed when we know that he has had a history of harming people. But he has been able to exist and continue his career. And her career, I'm assuming because she was in pageant, she may have wanted to be in the entertainment space. Whatever that she wanted was cursed because at the age of 18, she spoke up about Mike Tyson harming her. Another person that comes to mind is Ariana Jackson. Ariana Jackson accused Tupac Shakur of harming her. So with her situation, she was already in a sexual relationship with Tupac. And one day he invited her to a hotel. She came and he like, well, if you like me, then you must like my friends too. And left her in a room with people who harmed her. Those people were not charged. He was charged, and I believe his manager was charged because they coerced her to come to the room. But he was charged with that and went to prison for that. That I remember a little more because I was a little older. I remember being with my older sisters watching music videos. I was little, but I remember being with my I have sisters who are like 10 years older than me. So like with my older sisters, some Tupac video was on, and one of my sister's friends is like, Dad, that's messed up, that girl lied on him. And then I didn't even know that had happened. But I'm like, yeah, she shouldn't have lied. Like I'm just going along with it because it's like that's just what you do. Black women lie. She lied. Why would she lie on Tupac? That don't make no sense. And it's not until adulthood that I realized everything that had happened. But that was the consensus, that Ariana Jackson lied. And because she already had a previous relationship with Tupac, then it was like that's the kind of girl she was. Just all of that kind of stuff. The things that we are seeing or that we saw recently with Megan Thee Stallion. Like Megan is shot in the foot, yet all of these other things are brought up that has nothing to do with a gun, nothing to do with a bullet, nothing to do with any of that altercation, but all of these other things are brought up to discredit her. And that is the tactic that is used for all of these things, but particularly when it comes to Black women. I remember when watching Survivor and R. Kelly, one of the jurors, they have him in a documentary, and he's like, I just didn't believe them. I just didn't believe them. And the way he says it with disdain is just like, it's because who cares about Black girls? These are things that existed before the Metoo movement even touched the hip-hop space. I know Mike Tyson isn't a hip-hop artist, but I just wanted to add him in a conversation because he is another big name that I really think no one remembers was in prison for, like, convicted for this kind of crime. And the thing that really irks my nerves and is always brought up is that when Black men have to interact with the justice system because they are accused of harming Black women, people always want to invoke Emmett Till's name. Leave that boy out of it. Very different situation. A white woman lied and that boy was tortured to death. That is very different than accusing Mike Tyson of harm. That is very different of accusing Tupac of harm. Stop invoking that boy's name for your foolishness. There's many reasons why it's complicated for Black women to tell the world that they've been harmed by Black men. A lot of it comes from the solidarity that Black women have with Black men. I also have been raised to, one, you don't call the police, but you do not call the police on a Black man. That's what you do not do, because if you do, but it could possibly lead to them being shot or, whatever like that. So there's already a racial solidarity that Black women have with Black men. And then historically, there are other systemic factors as to why the marginalization of Black women also helps these perpetrators to continue to be able to exist and harm us. The experience of racism and sexism being something that happens to us simultaneously is one of those things. Stereotypes and also the hypersexualization of Black women leads to folks not caring when we're harmed. The lack of representation of opportunities of Black women in these industries. If you had more Black women in power in these spaces, it wouldn't completely eliminate it, but it would greatly reduce these type of harms existing and being the norm. There's limited support and resources for Black women. There's many cultural barriers, and then there's the fear of backlash for coming forward, inadequate legal protections for coming forward, and then this economic disparities that Black women face. And men are the financial gatekeepers. Because of patriarchy, men are the financial gatekeepers for a lot of these industries. Honestly, for a lot of how women exist, that's why it threatens a lot of men that more Black women are getting educated and we're making more money, because that takes away their gatekeeping ability. But in a lot of these industries, they're very male dominated. So these men are gatekeepers. So you literally will not get the job if you speak out against these harmful systems. Then there's the victim blaming. Why would you go to his room? The things that we see all the time where we make it so that it is her fault and she should know better and she should have done all the things to prevent the harm from happening. Lack of media coverage. Media coverage for Black women who are harmed are far and few between. I am surprised at the media coverage that Carly Russell received, because that is rare. I don't know. Makes me want to put on my For You hat, because that is rare. I have never seen that amount of media attention for a black woman. And then just the power dynamics of these industries, because these men are gatekeepers, they have all the power. So I think that you've got a lot of information, and maybe let's take a little break, ease your mind, get some water, get another snack, roll another blunt, and yeah, let's just take a little break. While we're taking this break, I want you to take a look at Mixed Vixen's Patreon. Patreon is how I financially keep this going. Your funds, you can help me do that. Pay a black woman. On Patreon, you will get exclusive content. You get to see videos before they are released to YouTube. I do Patreon only live streams. I also have videos that are just for patrons there. Video outlines are there. I do a lot behind the paywall. This allows me to exist in this capitalistic structure. Whether I want to or not, I have to survive in it. So if you have as low as $2 to contribute to the growth of Mixed Vixen, I will appreciate it. You are a real one. Now let's get back to the video. Misogynoir manifests in many different ways. Perpetually harmful stereotypes and promoting a devaluation of black women. Here are a few ways that misogynoir exists in hip-hop. So misogynistic lyrics, we've all heard it before. Many hip-hop songs contain lyrics that demean, objectify, and degrade black women. These lyrics often perpetuate stereotypes of hypersexualization, promiscuity, subservience, reinforcing harmful tropes about black women's identities and bodies. The most popular genre in the world, you are now communicating all of these harmful things to the world through misogynistic lyrics. I'm not gonna front. Too short, my favorite word is biatch too. Hip-hop has historically marginalized black women and has left us out. We do have some notable figures in hip-hop, but they're far and few between in comparison with men. What's happening right now in hip-hop is amazing. So many more women that I've ever seen in my life, but misogynoir is still happening because everyone is upset about, they rap around the same things, as if I haven't listened to decades of black men rapping about the same things, as if I haven't listened to decades of black men talking about sex, as if I haven't listened to decades. Like, come on. Y'all need to chill with that. Y'all need to chill with that. For real. Because we have hardly been here. And now that we're taking up this amount of space, y'all is mad. There's double standards in hip-hop. I think I just stated all of those double standards earlier. Men could do things that women cannot do. There's been whack male rappers who have been able to get a bag, who rap about the same things and have been rapping about the same things. Too Short's been rapping about the same things. But we mad at Megan. Just annoying. Violence against women. It's okay to be violent against women in general because of how misogyny works, but it is echoed in hip hop. And it contributes to the hostile environment that women in these industries have to just live with and take, because, that's the way it is. And if you want to run with the boys, that's what you got to do. Video vixens. Remember that era and the objectification of women? The way that men objectify women in hip hop videos existed even before the video vixen era, but women being used as objects and props. I think that's another reason why there are so many people who are angry about what people are calling the pussy rap aesthetic, is because these women are in their own videos twerking or whatever with each other, and it's not for men, and it's not as a prop for a man. It is not, this is me and my homegirls and this is what we do to have fun. And the agency in that makes a lot of men upset. Fun fact, I actually named Mixed Vixen as an ode to video vixens. Started out as a blog 12 years ago, but it was around a time when everyone to me was discarding video vixens and blaming them for everything that was wrong with women, blaming them for everything that was wrong with hip hop and why women couldn't exist in hip hop. I think that people use these women as a scapegoat for that, and I didn't like that then, so I named this Space Mix Vixen kind of as a ode to those women. They were existing in Misogynoir, and I don't know why the expectation was for them to dismantle that system when that's not how that works. Colorism.
With y'all, I think the biggest obstacle is colorism, and I'm gonna just tell y'all the truth because I would like to kick with y'all and laugh at everything.
It's big facts. Let's get to the facts.
You feel me? I would like to be funny and have y'all kikiing, but colorism is one of the biggest obstacles that not just myself, but a lot of women in this industry go through. So
explain what that is, because it's a lot of people out here that don't understand what that means.
Yeah, they don't understand, and then there's a lot of people who like to ignore it, like it's not something that affects, you know, black women, but it does affect us, and that's not playing the victim role. People think when people cry about colorism, they playing victim, but this shit is real. People will overlook you for somebody of a lighter color, a more slender nose, you know, a more European look. People will look over your talent and give your exact talent to them and say, go out there and act like Suki.
Colorism isn't everything, but it be all up in the videos and hip hop. They will literally say it, give me a red bone. So there's those pieces, and then just the stereotypical roles that you give women in hip hop. So a lot of songs and videos, black women may be portrayed in stereotypical roles, so they're angry or they're a Jezebel, reinforcing harmful, limiting narratives about our emotions and our behaviors. So it's essential to note, I'm going to say this again, it's essential to note, but while hip-hop perpetrates misogynoir, it is not the sole source of these issues. The broader society, historical racism, and intersectional biases play a significant role in shaping these situations within the genre. But hip-hop is a powerful force and has a capacity to influence change and the responsibility to address these issues and promote a more inclusive and respectful environment for all who participate in it. Hypermasculinity also has a huge influence on hip-hop culture. Hypermasculinity is a psychological and sociological term for exaggerations of male stereotypical behavior, such as an emphasis on physical strength, aggression, and human male sexuality. Even women in hip-hop have to appease hypermasculinity. So, you know that period of time in hip-hop where so many old heads like to talk about how Queen Latifah, MC Lyte, like this time where these women were covered and they wore baggy clothes and they respected themselves more. But they were also appeasing a hyper-masculine aesthetic because that's what the industry called for. You had to mute femininity to exist in hip-hop during those times. That wasn't a statement of respect. That is what the culture of hip-hop looked like for women at that time. Even when it got more sexualized, when we talk about when Lil Kim and Foxy Brown entered the chat, even though they dressed the way they dressed and talked about the things that they talked about, they rapped with deeper voices for a reason. You could not be fully feminine in these spaces. You still had to appease the hyper-masculine aesthetic that existed in hip-hop and still exists in hip-hop now. Also, when you think about someone like a Foxy Brown or a Lil Kim, their images, their aesthetics was something also given to them by a man. Hey, this is what I think men will want. This is what you should do. And I don't want to remove their agency from that, but they were teenagers when Jay-Z and Biggie Smalls interacted with them and introduced them to us as, you know, these female MCs. Historically, black men were equated to being animalistic and barbaric, ultimately seen as sexually menacing and susceptible to harming white women because of black men's savage ways. The very matter that showed how barbaric the nature of black men were is now the main factor in ranking their masculinity. Masculinity does not stop here. It still has its part in black culture. It mixes itself within the activism of hip hop. An industry dominated by men where hypermasculinity is hugely rewarded and goes unchecked is a recipe for disaster for Black women, Black queer folks, and even other men who fall out of that line of what masculinity is supposed to look like. Although the Me Too movement was created by a Black woman from the Bronx for Black women and other women of colors, many of those women have not benefited from this movement. With the exception of R. Kelly in the realm of hip hop, you know, he's hip hop-ish. The hip hop industry has gone pretty untouched and unaffected by this movement. There's many reasons why the hip hop industry has kind of been untouched by this movement, and I've mentioned a lot of those reasons earlier in this video that make it difficult for Black women to reveal the perpetrators of the harm that we receive. There's the artist power dynamics. The hip-hop industry, like many industries in entertainment, is dominated by men, and they are the gatekeepers of the industry. Until recently, the most popular hip-hop artists were men. Most of these people running these labels, men. Most of these people running these media entities, these hip-hop media entities, men. This power imbalance leads to so much harm. Make it very difficult for Black women and other women of color to work in these industries. There's a fear of retaliation for speaking out, glamorization of toxic behavior. It is okay to exist in this way. It is a part of the culture to be hypermasculine. This is the street code to exist in this way, and there's something wrong with you if you don't exist in this way. Again, the limited representation of women in hip-hop contributes to this, and the role that the media plays and the public perception that the media puts out about Black women and other women of color, shaping the narratives of these women and whether we should care about them if they are harmed. There are some notable instances that happened during the Me Too movement that came to light, but haven't really resulted in much. So one particular case is Drew Dixon, who accused Russell Simmons of harming her. I actually did a whole video about the On the Record documentary. I have it linked below where I go into detail about the harm she received and how she was kind of pushed out of the music industry because she came forward to talk about Russell Simmons, and she also spoke of L.A. Reid, who also made it really difficult for her to work with him as well. So please check out that video if you want the full Drew Dixon story. She accused him of harming her in 1995. She revealed to us in 2020 that he had harmed her in 1995. She had lived with this secret for like a really, really long time. And many people still to this day try to discredit her. Vanity Fair also released some of private text messages that they had with her without her consent. The reason why Russell Simmons was in charge is because he stepped down from all of his businesses, went to Bali, and waited out for the statute of limitations to come into place so that he wouldn't be charged. And now he's back in the States, you know, being horrible to his daughters. As of July 2023, no criminal charges have been filed against Russell Simmons. And many in hip-hop still see him as a godfather of hip-hop and still praise the things that he did for hip-hop and don't acknowledge the many women he's harmed. Dixon is one of the most popular ones we know of, but he has harmed many women. Check out that video that I did about that last year. Another well-known rapper who was like part of the origins of hip-hop, African Bambaataa, who is a pioneer and hip-hop DJ, rapper, producer, was accused of harming young boys and also trafficking young boys in the early 90s. These accusations came out around the time of the Me Too movement as well. But he is still revered as one of the pioneers of hip-hop, still highly regarded. Rappers like KRS-One have defended him. He was also a part of the Zulu Nation, the Universal Zulu Nation. When this lawsuit happened, when they called him John Doe. So when John Doe issues this lawsuit, the Zulu Nation did separate ties with him, but they said that was a personal matter. But the John Doe does reveal that like other people, a community with African Bambaataa were a part of the abuse. They would groom, they would bring boys there. I actually dated someone who we were talking about this years ago, And he's from that part of the Bronx where African Bambaataa is from. And he's like, nah, when I was a kid, we knew you don't go over there. Because he was still very connected to that community. And he said to me, nah, when I was a kid, you knew not to go over there. So this was something that was known, but just kept a secret. At this time, African Bambaataa has not responded to the lawsuit at all. So this is still in litigation. Then there's other incidents that happened pre-Me Too movement that were highly publicized, but have been erased. So I didn't actually know about this incident until I was listening to the podcast Louder Than a Riot. They have a season that's all about women in hip hop. And Kim Osorio, a journalist and who was also the editor-in-chief of the Source magazine at one point, she sued the magazine owners for workplace sexual harassment. In the podcast, they talk about how Benzino, who was one of the owners of The Source, made it a really, really, really hard place for women to work. There's more details of the allegations in the podcast that I can't really go into here on YouTube, so I'm going to link that episode in the description box. But Benzino and his people were wildin'. There was a 2-week trial, and she was awarded $4 million for this lawsuit. She won her lawsuit because she was wrongfully terminated because she came forward with these allegations. She didn't win this lawsuit because of the harm she receives. She received it because they retaliated and terminated her from her editor position. So it's not even noted that this person received harm and received restitution for it. When I was listening to this episode of Louder Than a Riot, when they were going to publish this episode, they sent them a cease and desist, said that Kim Osorio was not allowed to talk about this case. And so they had to redo the episode and remove her from like talking for herself. They do, account for it, and people share the things that she shared with them, but she couldn't be a part of that podcast episode. And the thing that's wild is the producers who were trying to, get comments. Can we get a comment from Benzino? Blah, 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 blah. They DM'd him to ask him if he wanted to be a part of this episode so he could speak his piece. And he was like, do I get paid? Do I get paid to come on an episode? Like, really? Really, bro? At that time, that was the largest lawsuit win based on a sexual harassment case in the entertainment industry in 2006. And somehow they managed to keep this like mum's the word. I'm sure there's some people who knew, but I had never heard of this until I had listened to that episode of the podcast. Pre-Me Too movement, but you see how even with her being awarded something or speaking up about her harm and receiving some kind of justice for it, even that instance was silent because this is not a wildly known case. Another case that predates the Me Too movement, but is very significant that I could not skip over, especially because these men that I'm talking about, their careers have been fine and not affected by the harm that they caused. In 1991, Dee Barnes was physically assaulted by Dr. Dre. On her show, she had aired a segment that showed the tension between Ice Cube and NWA. Ice Cube had left NWA and there's now a beef, right? She showed something on her show that, reveals that that's what's going on. And he was angry about it. So when he saw her at this record release party, according to Barnes, Dre picked her up by her hair and slammed her head and the right side of her body repeatedly against a brick wall near the stairway as his bodyguard held off the crowd with a gun. After, Dre tried to throw her down the stairs and he failed. Because he failed, he began kicking her repeatedly, kicking her in her ribs and her hands. She filed charges. He did plead no contest, and he was fined $2,500, 2 years probation, and he had to do community service. He's also been reported to be very physical abusive to his ex-partner, Michelle A. There's a movie about her life on Netflix now that details all of the harm she received at the hand of Dr. Dre. With the exception of African Bambaataa's victim, because they are a John Doe, I don't know who they are, but we know Drew Dixon, we know Kim Osorio, and we know Dee Barnes. All of their careers greatly affected by speaking up for the harm that they received. Drew Dixon was dropped out of the music industry. Dee Barnes, music journalist career put to a halt. Kim Ozario has been able to like exist, but not to the extent that she was able to exist in music journalism before. The difference could be because Drew and Dee Barnes are Black women versus Kim Ozario being a woman of color. I believe she's Puerto Rican. There's some nuance there that could be why that is. But all of these people have been allowed to be pioneers and be rewarded and be fixtures in hip hop, while the woman that they harm, the people, sorry, because African Bambaata's victim was a boy, the people that they harmed, lives are completely changed. They have been ostracized, they have been ridiculed, they have been driven out of industries, outside of also living with being a person who was a survivor of that kind of harm. Editor Queen here, literally editor. I'm like editing this, and the verdict for Tory Lanez drop, he's getting 10 years. Yes. I'm putting this here because I want to emphasize, and I don't think I did it enough in the video, that it is okay to harm. It is so okay to harm people that is why Tory Lanez navigated the past 3 years the way he did. That's why he showed no remorse. That's why he made songs about it. That's why he did so much stuff to taunt people. It's alleged that he paid off blogs and many media entities because the men that I presented in this video, you have it's documented history that you could harm Black people, Black women in this industry and still be successful. And I didn't talk a lot about Megan and Tory within this video because I wanted to make this a broader conversation and have people watching this understand that this is a systemic misogynist culture that's embedded in hip hop. And that's why Me Too couldn't permeate that, couldn't insert itself or dismantle anything in that, because it is so okay to harm Black women. And we have so many examples in the past that show us it's okay. Tory Lanez was not even famous. I didn't really even know. I don't know a Tory Lanez song. I can't even boycott Tory Lanez because I don't even know a Tory Lanez song. But because he is a Black man in an industry that protects them when they harm people, and people rally behind him. People rally behind Tory Lanez. People think that all of this, him being sentenced, him being charged, is like some kind of sacrificial thing, and it's unfortunate that this happened to this Black man when he is a harm. First of all, in the scheme of things, like the people I present in this video have done significant things in the hip hop industry. I'm not talking about the harm because they have also committed significant harm, but they have significantly implanted themselves in this industry to do things that I can understand people admiring, and there being a void if we completely discard these people from the culture, right? Tory Lanez hasn't even done that. I never heard of that person until the pandemic, and it was that demon time stuff. But people still, with his obscurity, and not even, this is the first time I've seen someone not even being, the woman who was harmed is more famous than the man and is treated this way. And it's because he knew, based on these past instances, these past examples that I presented in this video, that if he followed the script of these other folks, that he would probably be okay. And this is the one instance where it wasn't okay, and it's probably because he's not as rich as Russell Simmons. He's not as rich as Dr. Dre. You know, it could be some of that, but I bet you in 10 years when he comes out, they're saying free Tory Lanez already. So I just want to emphasize that There's been a long history of this and a long history of people ignoring black women in this industry when they are talking about being harmed. All right, let me get back to editing. There's always a mixed response when these accusations comes out. Lots of people who think that these are opportunists and people who are trying to gain something by coming forward. It is a very new phenomenon to just believe victims. I think it is great that this is where we are, but this is very new. I do see lots of people who are acting like this is an occurrence that happens always. It is very new for people to say, well, I'm going to believe the victim no matter what. I'd rather be wrong about believing the victim or survivor versus the other way around. That's a pretty new concept. I think it's an important concept because in all of these instances, we see the power dynamic and how these people are using the power dynamic to commit harm to people within the hip hop industry and to not be faulted for the harm that they are causing within the industry. I remember when Megan let the world know she was shot, and many of the men's response to it was to make jokes. 50 Cent made a joke. People made jokes about this person being shot. People automatically just didn't believe that she was shot. I don't understand why people didn't believe that she was shot other than we do not believe black women. Someone says they're shot, then I'm just going to believe it. I've never been shot in the foot. And most people I know have never been shot in the foot. So how do you know how you're supposed to act when you're shot in the foot? Got to the point where a photo had to be released of a bullet in her foot for people to believe that she was harmed. So I think about Tory Lanez, and yes, he has been convicted of shooting Megan in the foot. But I think about other convictions that did not derail the success of these artists. So Tupac was convicted of harming Ariana Jackson. Mike Tyson was convicted of harming Desiree Washington. Dr. Dre paid his little fine, were convicted of harming these people, but these are blips in their career. And I do believe in rehabilitation, but these are people who continue to harm people. Well, I would say with the exception of Tupac, because I've not heard of any other harm. So maybe he did the time and came out and realized that's not what you do. But when it comes to Mike Tyson or when it comes to Dr. Dre, we see a pattern that they continued. And that was just a blip in their career, and they were still able to be successful men. I will say that it was a little more difficult for Mike Tyson, but I think it had a lot to do with ableism and classism because of how he talks, and because boxing is a sport that tends to bring in people of a lower class to participate. But still able to have a career, still able to exist, still able to be famous, and have been able to kind of like repent. And they destroyed the lives of these women. And to this day, if you look in that tweet that went viral, I have it in the D box where I'm asking about black women who made public the black men who harmed them. Even in that post, people are still degrading Desiree Washington, and that's something that happened in the 90s. People are still talking badly about Ayanna. People are still talking badly about Dee Barnes. And these are things that happened decades ago to these black women, and they're still paying for speaking up about the harm that they received. African Bambaataa, still doing his thing. Benzino went on to be a reality star, to be a corny rapper, because I don't think his rap career went anywhere, but he got an opportunity to do that. These are harmful individuals who are able to still prosper and capitalize in a hip-hop space. That shouldn't be the case. So how do we move forward? How do we make the industry, the hip-hop industry, a safer space for black women? I think that the narrative has to change. Hypermasculinity should not be rewarded. Misogynoir should not be rewarded. Homophobia should not be rewarded. Those aren't things that make you masculine. Being oppressive and discriminatory to people does not make you masculine. That whole idea of what masculinity looks like, specifically for Black men, because y'all are the men that I care about, needs to be dismantled. Men have to be on board. Black men have to be on board with dismantling these ideas of hypermasculinity, their ideas of misogynoir. They have to be on board with that as well, or it won't happen. Okay? No one is attacking you. No, it's not a gender war. Y'all are harming us. And we are speaking up about the harm. And y'all need to get it together. People need to learn about consent. Like, it's wild how much people refuse to acknowledge how important consent is. People are so afraid of sex ed. That is an essential part of sexual education. Consent. What the fuck is it? And what the fuck is it not? Respect is not earned. That's another thing that helps misogyny and misogynoir exists, is that you think women have to earn your respect. Like, no, just respect us. And that's it. We should not have to do anything for that to happen. Just respect us because we're people. Why does it have to be earned? And the leaders of hip hop, the Diddies, all of the motherfuckers that y'all look up to in hip hop need to be leaders and take responsibility for the harm that they've caused and change that. It's not going to change if the heads of these industries, if Russell Simmons is allowed to go to Bali and y'all still thirsty and want to dick ride and go to dinner with him and take pictures with him. What are you telling to survivors? What are you telling to girls? What are you telling to boys when you still canoodle with people where it's known that they harm people? You should not have, there should not be like this whisper of like, well, you know how he is. No, that shouldn't be a thing. We're ostracizing the survivors and rewarding the perpetrators. It's backward, guys. It's backward. These are workplaces. The hip-hop industry is a workplace. So there are people you answer to. There are policies that exist, but no one enforces them and no one cares to enforce them. And I think that's another problem. I think about Kim Osario's situation. She's literally working at a magazine and reports what happens to HR and is fired. You can't have these vanity policies. You have them there just for the looks, and you're not actually enforcing them and living by them. There needs to be an intersectional solidarity. There is no intersectional solidarity in the Metoo movement. The fact that Melissa Milano just ran with that shit and didn't even credit a Black woman, just that beginning the movement in that way, it started off flawed. It started off excluding Black women. And yes, they brought Tarana in it later, not later, but they brought Tarana back in it because of Black Twitter dragging their asses, right? But when it comes to who was the face of this movement, who received the most justice from this movement, it was white women. It was not Black women, and it was not other women of color at all. There has been no intersectionality with this movement. And it's been a high focus on white women in Hollywood and white women, like really big white actresses in Hollywood. And that's it. So there's like a class thing and also a race thing where you are not being intersectional with who should receive justice for their harm and how to prevent harm from happening for other people as well. There's no safe space for women to even talk about these things. At this point, the term Me Too has become a joke for many people. I have watched TV shows where people are like, oh, no, he's been Me Too'd. Like something has happened to him. No, that person has done something. But we have taken this phrase that was a phrase of solidarity, a phrase that said that you are not the only one, and have made it kind of like a punchline to say like, he been Me Too'd. That's irresponsible. No, Say what it is. That person is a fucking creep. And we've also failed to highlight the unique challenges Black women face. A lot of the things that I mentioned already in this video is what has led to this Me Too movement not being intersectional. This movement, created by a Black woman, did not benefit Black women in the way that I know that she wanted it to do so, because of misogynoir, because of white supremacist, patriarchal capitalism. That's why I always make the distinction of my politic being a womanist politic. I'm not doing the same thing that white women are doing. I'm not doing feminism the same way that they're doing it, because the way that they do it only benefits them. It does not benefit me. It is not intersectional. It does not think of me. It does not include me at all. So we've said a lot. We've touched a lot of things. We've had a lot of feelings. I know I've had a lot of feelings, because this is a lot and it's disappointing and it's unfair that once again Black women and femmes get the short end of the stick. Yet when we are trying to have these intercommunal conversations with Black men, they also only highlight these systems that benefit white women. If you've made it to the end of this video, I'm led to believe that you truly care about the rehabilitation of hip hop and how we can make it less harmful for Black women and other women of color in that industry. My call to action to you is to support more inclusive music, support queer rappers, support women rappers. I don't care if you hear about a pussy 60 times in a day. You know how many times I've heard y'all in a day say the same stuff and I still drop down and got my ego on? You can do that. See outside of yourselves. But yeah, I would like to know what are some ways that you, if you are a Black woman, actually if you're a Black man also, any Black person watching this, what are the things that you are doing to contribute to hip hop being a healthier space for Black women and Black femmes? I would love to know. Please put those in the comments for me. And if you made it to the end of the video, thank you, because this was a little bit longer than what I like my videos to be, but it is what it is. I had a lot to say. If you made it to the end of the video, put the peach emoji. Put the peach emoji in the comments. And as always, you are a bad bitch. You are enough. Stay fly. I will see you in the next video.